Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. We have 18 participants now. I hope everybody is fine, doing well. We are going to start the program just in a minute. So I would just say you should all just stay put. In the next few seconds, we'll just kickstart. And thank you for joining. Okay, so we are starting. Good morning, everyone. The AMENET online seminar, which is dubbed the Climate Change and Governance, General Trends in African Countries, which is being organized by the University of Ghana together with the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, is about to start. And officially, I would like to welcome all of you to this wonderful conference or workshop, sorry. Now, the event is going to be recorded, so we would ask you to accept the confirmation message that appears on your screen. Now, in the first place, kindly bear in mind these few considerations. The first is that it is very important that you identify yourself in the Zoom with your name, possibly your complete name, including your surname, so that we are able to identify you, so that in case you are in need of a certificate of attendance, that could be done for you. We also want you to keep your cameras and microphones off to avoid any interferences. Lastly, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat, which we will find at the bottom of the screen. In case you need to contact the organization team, just feel free to use the chat also. Now, at the end of each section, there will be a question and answer time, and then we'll have a discussion. I hope we are all fine. All right. So with no further delay, I would like to welcome the Director of the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies of the University of Ghana, Professor Erasmus Owusu, so that he can take us through the welcome address. Thank you very much for attending for today. And the floor is yours, Professor. You may take over.
Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Moderator. I'm very glad to be part of this. Do you want me to put my camera on, or it should still be as it is?
I think it will be very wonderful for all of us to see you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Please, do you see me now?
Yes,
or it's
please.
not clear enough?
It's fine. You are just doing fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So distinguished participants, students that have joined us, I'm very happy to welcome everybody to this conference. If you were physically meeting in Ghana, I would have said, welcome to Ghana. But we have people from different countries participating in their own countries. So I would say, I welcome you to this conference on climate change and governance, looking at general trends in African countries. Indeed, you agree with me that this is the appropriate time to do this, as climate change continues to affect every area of our lives, and it is a cross-cutting issues in all key areas affecting our national development, and indeed the agenda that we have set for ourselves as countries in Africa. There is therefore the need to pay serious attention to climate-related issues in our national discourse, bearing in mind that environmental challenges we face are not simple. They are not simple, and this is something we should pay attention to. So colleagues, permit me to quickly provoke our thoughts with some key climate challenge questions that I always ask my colleagues when we meet like this. The first one is, how do we address the issues and drivers of vulnerability? Second, how do we build a solid response capacity and governance when it comes to climate change issues? How do we manage climate risk? And finally, how do we confront the whole climate change challenge confronting nations, and particularly the African capacity? How do we use that to confront the climate change challenge? These are difficult questions to answer, especially within the African continent. So as we progress through this conference, we need to make the effort to come out with serious suggestions coming from academia, taking into consideration specific needs and specific solutions that are applicable to what we can do and how we can take them seriously. Bear in mind that individual countries have specific problems, and therefore, how do we make our recommendations applicable to different solutions, different countries, and how can they be applied within the sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere? Now, one key thing we must remember is that we cannot do the same thing repeatedly and expect different results. Over the years, we've talked about climate change several times, different fora, but what are we going to do differently this time? I want us to understand that we must change, because most of the challenges we face today were solutions of yesteryears. Yes, things that in previous years people thought were solutions have now become problematic. So how do we do things differently? So we need to be more innovative in our propositions, even as we seek to solve problems of climate change today. How do we make it more attractive? Nature-based solutions. People are talking about so many things. Where do we move from here? And what will be our recommendations? We must remember that no problem can withstand pressure of sustained thinking. So basically what we are saying is that we need to put in a lot of thinking, even as we try to come up with solutions. Because when there's pressure of sustained thinking, problems will go. And universities are supposed to be good at thinking. So that is our job. So the ball is now in our court to put on that thinking caps and come out with solutions that are attractive, that are implementable, that people can see that indeed, these are serious people coming together to help solve the climate challenge, specifically governance issues, which this conference seeks to address. So once again, I want us to remember that the solutions of yesterday are the problems of today. And therefore, we need to do things differently and with deep thinking. On that note, I want to say thank you very much for making the time to participate, and I wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. We are most grateful. Thank you for the insightful questions that are begging for our answers. Without any further delay, we would like to move on to call on the AMENET representative in Ghana to give us the opening remarks. So he's in the person of Professor Daniel TWEREFOU, Professor of Economics at the University of Ghana and the AMENET coordinator in Ghana. Prof, you may have the floor.
Right, thank you, Kojo, for the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, you all recall that on October 4th, 2016, the Paris Agreement, which improved upon and replaced the Kyoto Protocol, an earlier international treaty designed to curb the release of greenhouse gases, entered into force and had been signed by 195 countries, ratified by 180 as of January 2021. Unfortunately, years down the lane, when the world is preparing to better implement this international agreement with the environmental ramification, the first case of COVID-19 was reported in December 2019. You will all agree with me that the impact of COVID-19 on the world is diverse and complex. The UNDP argues that the impact of the pandemic will vary from country to country, but most likely increase poverty and inequality at a global scale, making the achievement of sustainable development even more urgent. In the midst of all these challenges posed by climate change and COVID-19, governance in Africa cannot be said to be the best, and to some extent exacerbates the current challenges facing Africa. It is in this regard that this training and dialogue section has come at an opportune time. This activity is part of a set of events organized by the Jean Monnet Network, AMENET for short, and the AMENET means that the European Union, Mediterranean, and African integration, in the global age. AMENET is made up of 14 universities, 8 from Africa and 6 from Europe. This training and dialogue section is really supported by the European Commission and brings academic partners and institutions together with the sub-Saharan African countries, Mediterranean African countries, and Europe. The session revolves around 2 key issues, climate change and governance, which are very topical issues, especially with the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, the session aims at harnessing ideas on how to sustain development through better mitigation and adaptation measures, as well as interrogating the governance issues that many African countries face. The University of Ghana is proud to be associated with this noble cause, and would like to extend gratitude to AMENET Secretariat, especially Professor Jose Melon, for the opportunity. We also like to express our appreciation to the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana, Professor Ebenezer Usu, for providing oversight in the management of AMENET activities in Ghana. Special thanks also go to the Director of the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies, Professor Erasmus Owusu, the Vice Rector for Internationalization of Ms. Carmela Calais Bode, all the resource persons who have agreed to share their wealth of knowledge with us, as well as all participants of this conference. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Daniel TWEREFOU. We are most grateful. Our next presenter is Dr. Arkebe OQUBAY. Dr. Arkebe OQUBAY is a senior minister and has been at the center of policymaking and government leadership for over 30 years. He has been recognized for his innovative and strategic leadership role in the economic transformation of Ethiopia. Dr. Arkebe is currently a candidate for the post of Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and has been endorsed unanimously by the heads of states of member states of the African Unions, the sole candidate with the requisite leadership capacity and knowledge to lead the organization. He has also served as chair and vice chair on the boards of several leading public corporations, including the Ethiopian Airlines, Ethiopian Industrial Parks Development Corporation, and the Ethiopian Railway Corporation. He was also the founding chancellor of Addis Ababa Science and Technology University. As a mayor of Addis Ababa, the political and diplomatic capital of Africa, Minister Arkebe transformed the city into a vibrant business hub. He won the ABN Best African Mayor of 2006 award and was a finalist in the World Mayor Award in 2006. Dr. Arkebe is Professor of Practice at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa, a visiting professor at Sciences Po in Paris, and Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. He is also a distinguished visiting professor at Fudan University in Shanghai. He is a UNIDO Honorary Research Fellow, a distinguished fellow at the London-based think tank, the Overseas Development Institute, ODI. He is also a research associate at the Center for African Studies, University of London. He is the founder and chair of Policy Research Dialogue for Africa, an initiative that promotes the economic transformation, sustainable development, and economic governance of developing countries. Dr. Arkebe holds a PhD in development studies from SOAS, University of London. His recent publication works include, among others, a path-breaking book on the African industrialization experience, that is Made in Africa, Industrial Policy in Ethiopia, published by the Oxford University Press in 2015. It's a university handbook of the Ethiopian economy. Another publication includes How Nations Learn, Technological Learning, Industrial Policy, and Catch-up, published by the Oxford University Press in 2019. Another publication is the China, Africa, and an Economic Transformation, also published by the Oxford University Press. African Economic Development, Evidence, Theory, Policy, also published by the Oxford University Press in 2020. The Oxford Handbook of Industrial Hubs and Economic Development, and also the Oxford Handbook of Industrial Policy, all published by the Oxford University in 2020. His ability to combine the theoretical understanding of the process of industrialization with the practice of policy implementation has earned him recognition by the New African as one of the 100 most influential Africans of 2016 and a leading thinker of Africa's strategic development. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further introductions, I would like to welcome Dr. Arkebe OQUBAY to take the floor. Doc, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, dear participants. Thank you very much for your time and for inviting me to participate in this important conference on an important and very strategic issue, the climate issue. My presentation will focus on three important themes. I would like to first present the bigger picture, and then I will be talking and share my perspective on climate change in view of African response. I will also be highlighting on COVID-19 because this is a global threat which is inseparable from climate change. And finally, I will try to share my perspective, the policy responses of developing world. The bigger picture tells us that there are important global trends dominant and driving global economic growth. Some of these important trends include, first is a climate change. And the climate change or environmental collapse is one of the most and deepest crisis of our century. And this will permeate all areas of economic growth and social structure. And we need to bring in our perspective when we discuss about economic growth in the 21st century. Second one is the pandemic. Global pandemic is now become very recurrent. We have seen SARS, we have seen MERS, we have seen Ebola, we have seen COVID-19 in 2020 and continuing in 2021, and also forecasted that it will still be there with us until 2022, until vaccine is universally available for billions in developing countries. We also see the economic recession and financial crisis of 2009 and 2020. And we have witnessed in a decade time to global crisis. This tells us something. The global economic growth has become volatile, and we are going to face this trend in the future as well. Inequality is a very critical issue of our time. Inequality in terms of gender, inequality in terms of income, especially people living below poverty line, and also international inequality between the rich countries and middle income and low income countries. And these have critical impact on the growth trend in 21st century. We also see that in order to respond to this, we need to have a suitable and convenient international governance, but we all know that the current international governance system does not match well, and we have seen that multilateralism is continuously being eroded, and we need to live within this system, and we also need to improve this element. We can still mention some other global trends such as digital transformation or IR4 or demographic trends as well. Especially the demographic trend has significant implication for our continent. By 2040, from 4 inhabitants of our planet, 1 is going to be African. Our population will reach 2.5 billion. This has significant implication not only for our continent, but also worldwide. And this could be a time bomb, but it could also be an important driver of economic growth and improvement of well-being. So these are the key fundamental issues we need to bear in mind when we discuss about climate change, when we discuss about COVID-19 and also the policy implications. From an African perspective, we have witnessed after year 2000, relatively accelerated growth. Africa has been able to achieve over 4% in the last 2 decades, which is an important improvement in contrast to the 90s and 80s, where growth has been below 2%. But we also see that in many African countries, in almost all African countries, economic transformation is lagging behind, and the economic and structural transformation is at weak level. And we also see the growth is uneven. We see some bright places where growth has been accelerated double digit. For instance, in Ethiopia, for 15 years, the economy has been growing by 10.5% since 2004, according to World Bank data. But we also see some places also where growth has been stagnant. So the unevenness is an important element we need to consider. However, this all tells us that Africa is moving and Africa is making progress. I should also mention that Africa's commitment, African leaders' commitment, African government's commitment for economic integration has been able to make significant progress. After a long journey from the beginning, from the founding of Organization for Africa Unity, OAU, in 1963, the continent has made significant progress to the establishment of Africa Union Commission, and recently to the establishment of African Continental Free Trade Area, which was launched this year on January 1st. And African leaders launched this African Continental Free Trade Area in the middle of COVID crisis. This shows the significance of this policy, the significance of African policy makers for an economic integration of our continent. We also see that Africa CDC has been established, and Africa CDC has been playing an important role in experience sharing, and it shows the unified voice of our continent. So these are the 3 important trends I would like to mention on our continent. Let's come back to the major fundamental issue of climate change. In terms of fighting climate change or advocating for environmental sustainability, we can trace 2 important milestones where all member countries of the United Nations have been collaborated and have been able to make some positive progress. The 2009 Copenhagen Summit on Climate Change made real breakthrough on the content of environmental sustainability. And in 2015, the Paris Climate Summit also has been able to put a declaration on environmental sustainability. What we learned is that climate change is not a hypothesis, it's a real global threat. And the current medical issues or the pandemics are also linked with climate change. Just take malaria. Malaria is linked also with climate change. We also see that climate change has a global dimension. This is quite important, telling us that not only action at national level is important, but also at regional level and at global level. We also see that we don't have much cushion for a fallback position, and there is no contingency, and we are just at the verge of environmental collapse. And we also know that not all regions and countries equally contribute to environmental collapse, and we know Africa contributes only 3%, but it's a continent that is most affected, 3% carbon emission, but it's a continent that is significantly affected by climate change. Having said this, what is the pathway forward? The pathway forward is green transformation, green agenda, green growth. And this requires a complex and an interconnected social and economic transformation across many industries, and this involves also all citizens of our planet. So green transformation is an ongoing agenda. It has to be deepened, and the only pathway forward is green transformation. Why do we have to focus on green transformation as a pathway? Why do we have to advocate carbon neutral industrialization? The reason is simple. First, be it the rich and the poor, be it the most advanced industrialized countries or those developing world, we are living in the same planet. We only have one planet to live. So the planet, if it collapses, we lose. So we have to put effort to stop this environmental collapse. But second point is we have responsibility for the next generation, for our kids, for our grandchildren. We don't own the planet. We only live through it and we pass to the next generation. And our obligation is to pass the planet with its current situation without polluting it and actually by improving it. So because of this, we need to understand that we have deeper responsibility. Secondly, green transformation is an opportunity. It's not conditional to assistance from donors. Whether we get assistance from donors or advanced economies or industrialized economies or OECD countries, we must be able to act unconditionally. This is absolutely important. First, we have as developing countries and as Africa, an opportunity to build from scratch. We haven't yet industrialized and we have to industrialize. If we follow green industrialization, if we follow carbon neutral path, we will be building manufacturing sector or industrial capacity that will last forever. In addition to this, green transformation gives us opportunity in new industries. Let's look at green energy industries, solar, wind, etc. So it's an opportunity to build green industries. It's also an opportunity to improve productivity at firm level, at industry level, and circular economy helps us to save resources. We also know that the technologies we are now having and which are evolving will help us to achieve green transformation. Digital transformation are all important to achieve environmental sustainability. If we look at smart cities concept, if we look at smart eco-industrial parks, it shows that digital technology can help us achieve our strategy of green transformation. So when we say commitment also, it also includes learning. Without learning, policies cannot be sustained, policies cannot be improved. So we have to continuously learn with the time. We have to look at best practices from many countries, and we have to use this. Is this viable? Yes, it's 100% viable. And a good example is Ethiopia. Ethiopia has been an important player during the Copenhagen summit. Late Prime Minister Meles presented the continent and was part of the process. In 2010, Ethiopia adopted a green economy strategy. It was the first African country to have a green economy strategy. In the last decade, the country has shown its commitment. Ethiopia is planting billions of trees across the country, and you may have been aware of the news in the last few years as well. Last summer, rainy season, billions have been planted, and this has continued across the country, which is absolutely important for environmental recovery. Secondly, Ethiopia uses currently 100% renewable and clean energy. It doesn't use coal energy. It doesn't use any fossil oil. It primarily uses hydropower, solar energy, wind energy, geothermal, and this it has achieved 100% green energy. The new railway systems and networks are being developed are electric powered, and also the light rail system in Addis Ababa is electric powered. That is the way forward, and which means we don't need to pollute the environment to improve transport efficiency. All industrial parks being built in Ethiopia are eco-industrial parks. They are zero-emission industrial parks. 95% water is recycled, and all important principles of environmental sustainability are being introduced, and companies are also encouraged to use circular economy principles. This shows that a developing country, an African country, a low-income country can implement environmental sustainability strategy in a way to promote and support its industrialization strategy. Next, I would like to touch on COVID-19 because we are in the middle of crisis. If we have thought that COVID-19 is behind us, we have to look at India. We have to look at the third wave in Europe. We have to look at in Latin America. We are in the middle of waves of COVID-19. And no one can 100% forecast when COVID-19 is going to end. And what have we learned from COVID-19 crisis? First, no one was able to predict, even by December 2019, that COVID pandemic is already coming. No one was able to predict. No country, no industry was ready. And it has been unprecedented crisis because it was complex, not only public health emergency, but social, economic, and political crisis as well. It has a global scope. It wasn't limited, let's say, like Ebola in few African countries. This covers 200 countries across all continents. So the global scope has an important factor to determine our responses. Without global response, we cannot stop COVID-19. And in the future also, we need to be prepared, and it requires global collaboration. The depths of this crisis has been across countries, across industries, across firms and families. Everyone has been affected. So this is the first fact. This is unprecedented and complex crisis. Second, we have observed that global collaboration has been very, very weak. We have seen a weak unified response action. We have seen posturing of COVID crisis has been one dominant view, and many governments trying to appease their domestic constituency. We have seen also vaccine nationalism, and I prefer to call it vaccine greed, is still a major challenge. And currently, almost all developing countries are still looking for vaccine, and it's less probable that they will get it before 2022. We have also seen developing countries suffering debt, and debt stress has been a significant part. And there has not been a common consensus also on some of the solutions, including by international organizations on the, for instance, issuing of special drawing rights or SDR, which would have helped developing countries. At continent level, all governments have responded, have taken bold and swift measures. I should say we should be proud, and to the surprise of many, the continent responded. The low level of COVID-19 is not because of luck. It's not because it's rural area dominated. It's first time African countries, governments learned from Ebola crisis. They took lessons and everyone was scared, and they took bold and swift measures with few exceptions. And it also showed that Africa's economies are vulnerable. The vulnerability has been significant. Economies that have not been diversified, even those with high petroleum earning, were vulnerable for this crisis. We have also seen cooperation of African leaders. We have seen that Africa CDC has played an important role. And in 2020, close to 50 million people have been pushed below poverty line. And according to some estimates, over 3.5% contraction occurred in 2020. This is a big defeat, and this is the first time an economic recession has occurred in our continent. We should also mention that the crisis effect has been uneven for all, and we are still in the middle of the crisis. African countries must scale up, must take lessons, and must be ready for the next wave, and also for a crisis which we are witnessing in India and even worse. Being ready is important, and it's not time to celebrate. So we need to be ready to fight and to make free our continent from COVID-19. But more importantly, we need to be ready for the next pandemic, which we don't really know what's going to be, but we have just to see, looking at the frequency of this virus pandemics in the last 20 years, it's highly probable we'll see another crisis in the coming 5 years. So we have to be ready for that one. We have to focus on building primary healthcare infrastructure. We have to protect our important sectors. The approach of Ethiopian government has focused on 3 issues. First, it primarily relied on primary healthcare infrastructure. We don't have resources for ICU. We don't have resources for ventilators. What we can do is, as it requires engagement of the public, all citizens, and across the country, it had to rely on over 20,000 health centers which have been built in the country. And the strategy has been a primary healthcare infrastructure to defend all pandemics and also infectious diseases. Second one is, as a good example of building resilience, I should mention about Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines plays an important role in Ethiopia and of course in the continent. It's an important sector that generates significant export revenue, and Ethiopian Airlines adapted to the new environment. It was very clear the government cannot provide rescue package, no money to save the airlines. It was very clear that the airline has to swim and survive or to die. And this is what the leadership did, the board, as well as the management and all employees. It diversified into new businesses, cargo business. It doubled productivity of cargo aircrafts from 10 hours to 20 hours. It converted over 30 aircraft from passenger to cargo. And it also cut all costs possible, cost reduction strategies. And ultimately, the outcome was that the airline has survived 2020 without making any loss, without receiving any rescue package, without laying off a single employee from its 17,000 employees, and without even cutting any benefit of the employees, because we have to be ready for the next growth phase as well. And on the other issue, the government's capacity to support all sectors is limited. One of the key priority has been to protect the manufacturing and export sector, especially in industrial parks. And it also built quite quickly in period of 2 years, 2 months, it was able to have sufficient PPE production for domestic market as well as for export. It also started the PCR diagnostic kits manufacturing last September, and this has been the priority. It's not possible to act across all sectors and having a targeted approach, a very selective approach, is an important approach. Finally, what do we learn from these global threats? These are the 2 major global threats we'll be facing in 21st century. And economic crisis is also a major phenomena in during 21st century. We have seen the frequency, the volatility is increasing. So the policy implications are 5. First, what we have seen is COVID-19 and other crises. The impact is twice on developing countries in contrast to developed countries. This is what we have seen during this crisis. And what we have learned is economic diversification matters. The crisis exposed the fundamental vulnerability of African economies. In Africa, manufacturing sector has been quite weak, while we know that manufacturing is a key sector that creates jobs, sustainable, decent jobs, that generates and adds value for export goods, that also contributes to sustained growth of agriculture. However, many African countries still rely primarily on primary industries such as mining or petroleum or agriculture without much value addition. This is a key lesson we have learned. Economic diversification matters, economic transformation matters a lot. The second lesson we have received is industrial capacity and industrial policy matters. We have seen countries that have good industrial capacity were able to cope with the crisis. They were quite fast to supply enough PPE, enough PCR test kits, enough vaccine capacity, and these are countries that had good research capability. And these are countries that have used active industrial policy. And we have seen some countries are already in recovery mode. So this tells us industrial capacity and industrial policy again matters. And in this direction, we need to focus on building productive investment, selected and targeted sectors. We need to build industrial ecosystem. We also need to focus on building domestic linkages and domestic capabilities. Number 3 lesson is, we have seen that the role of government is absolutely important. The advice from some corners is, you don't need a strong government. That has been the lesson given to us, prescribed to us. What we have learned is states and governments matter. We have seen this in advanced economies. We have seen this in emerging economies. We have seen this in developing countries. When we say a strong state, it doesn't mean a big government. It means an effective state that can mobilize the resources, that can bring together all partners, that can have effective coordination. So we need to strengthen the governments, not only at federal or national level, but also subnational and sub-regional level. The role of the state is critical in health, critical in economic recovery, and critical in improving the political environment and also socio-economic livelihood. Number 4 lesson has been global collaboration is an absolute necessity. We need to focus on building multilateralism. Having global collaboration and a strong basis for multilateralism creates positive predictability. It helps us to prevent threats, global threats. It also helps us to bring in global growth. We should note that the global investment, FDI inflow, has not recovered yet to 2007 level. Around 2007, global FDI inflow was close to 2 trillion. In 2020, it fell down to 1.3 trillion. So what we need is, we need a global collaboration to revitalize global economy, to ensure that there is rapid economic growth and a bigger pie that will be sufficient for everyone. And within this direction also, Africa needs to closely work with all partners. Africa needs to work with traditional partners, with new partners such as emerging economies. And I should highlight on this forum that Spain is playing an important role in bringing both Europe and Africa closer. I have seen their policy focuses now that Spain serves as a bridge to bring both Europe and Africa. And this is absolutely important, because if you just go to Tangier port in Morocco, you can see 10 kilometers away is Spain, which means this is just one continent. And we need to highlight that a strategic partnership between Europe and Africa is going to be important. And Europe also and Africa should engage with all new partners as well, from emerging economies and also advanced economies. This is important for the economic transformation of our continent. Lastly, we have also seen that the concept of leadership is changing. COVID-19 has shown us that the old conventional way of leadership is not going to work. This is critical for the training of our policymakers. We have seen that resilience is becoming central now. Resilience at family level, resilience at industry level, resilience at economy level, resilience at global value chain level. So resilience becomes core in terms of leadership concept. The second point is learning. Learning becomes central. Countries that learn fast, countries that do not show complacency, can move fast and respond. We have also seen that adaptation is absolutely important. We cannot predict what is going to happen in the not only in the long term, but even in the short term. So we need to be vigilant. We need to adapt with the environment. These are the points I would like to highlight, and thank you very much for inviting me again. And I wish you a very productive conversation and a productive conference. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. We are very happy for this nice presentation and bringing us to the consciousness of the COVID-19 crisis, climate change, and the policy implications for developing countries. Just a quick highlight on the things you just said. Thank you for reminding us that for a continent that is growing at an average of 4% and only contributing about 3% to climate change, it is still very important to be, embarking on green transformation. We should focus on issues that has got to do with building a carbon neutral path to industrialization, and also to preserve the global world for the next generation. And this has to be done within the scope of learning from good practices. And thank you for the insights from Ethiopia, where they are growing more trees and actually engaging in zero emissions industrial parks. And the fact that you also draw attention to the impact of COVID-19, that in 2020, the continent actually contracted about 3.5%. That is very, insightful to know. And we are grateful that you shared with us the importance of building primary healthcare infrastructure, and also the need for diversification when you use the Ethiopian Airlines as an example, and also the importance of supporting industries. And the key 5 policy implications that you actually concluded with are also very insightful. We thank you for all of that. That economic diversity matter, industrial capacity matter, The role of state is also very important, and the need for global collaboration, and also the fact that leadership is very key in family, in economy, in all other areas. And in doing that, we should be careful and also be important with resilience, learning, and adaptation. We thank you very much, and we are grateful. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next presentation. I would like to remember participants that you can still send in your questions through the chat, so that after this section, we will then have a very beautiful discussion using your questions. So kindly feel free to be piling up your question in the chat. Our next presentation is by Professor Daniel TWEREFOU. He is going to speak on the impact of climate change on road infrastructure in Ghana. So Prof, you may have the floor now.
Thank you, Kojo, for the opportunity. I'm going to make a PowerPoint presentation so you can see my slide. I hope it's visible to everybody.
Yes, it's fine.
Right. In this presentation, I intend drawing the attention of participants to one area that has in a way been forgotten, or where work that has been done focus on more potential, moving from the potential to the actual, and trying to give policymakers the options available, and of course, from an economic perspective, the cost implications. So this is going to be the outline of the presentation. We're going to look at the climate change projections and its impact on road infrastructure specifically. And then once we've done that, we will limit the impact to roads, which is the core focus for this presentation. We will look at the objectives of what we want to present, or what I intend sharing with you, and what the literature says about, what I intend sharing with you. Having done that, I'll go through the methodology. I must say that the methodology is a little elaborate, quite detailed in the methods paper that was published from this work. But we will make an attempt to summarize it. The model that was developed based on so many things, and the idea was to apply the model to Ghana. So trying to tell you the program that was written becomes quite a lot. But the concept, the key is a concept that informed the software that was developed for this work, is what we will discuss. Then we will look at the results, which is quite simple, and some discussions of the results. So we all know that the issue of climate change is now not debatable, and the impact is quite there. The three stages of stages of climate change here, in terms of being able to know the greenhouse emissions that are being emitted. So we have through regressions, we are always able to estimate the amount of greenhouse that will be emitted for a long time. We also know that through the global circulation models, we are able to know how this increase in greenhouse gases will affect temperature, will affect precipitation, will affect sea level rise, the key core areas where climate change impact can be felt. The big question is about how this, change in temperature, change in precipitation, and then change in sea level rise will affect the economy. And that is the practical areas where many economists are focusing today. I must say that most of this work in that area are talking about potential impact, because climate change is a long-term event. We don't know what will happen, and therefore many of the work are focused on the potential impact, moving away from the actual impact, or trying to use software, like experiments to simulate the actual impact that will be in terms of change in temperature and in terms of and the impact on the infrastructure. From theory, we do know that high temperature, increased solar radiation leads to early cracks in roads. Okay, so when the temperature is very high, definitely the materials that are used expand, and it leads to cracks. In Africa and in Ghana, for example, the situation is quite intense because the temperature is very high. Aside that, in many cases, the materials that are used sometimes may not be the best, and therefore the impact of increasing cracks in roads is quite there. Early cracks in roads also reduces life of asphalt roads surfaces, and this is something which Eli and Philip have really elaborated. When it comes to precipitation, we know that high precipitation leads to creation and deepening of existing potholes. And if you look at Africa, where maintenance is not the best, what happens is that when there is a little pothole in roads, and then the precipitation increases during the rainy season, after 1 or 2 months, you will see very big holes, which we no longer can call it a hole, but really a massive sort of hole that has got impact on vehicles and all the economic activity that goes on. The sea level rise is also one thing. Flooding, gravel, and unpaved roads adjacent to seashores are having impact. I've seen models that are telling us that many roads, let's say on the shores of Ghana, right, may have or may be impacted by climate change because the sea level rise is going to extend inside. And let's say in the next 50, 60 roads, on the road along our beaches may have to pave way for floods. So these are from theory, right? From theory, we look at this as some of the practical impact of climate change on roads. Infrastructure in general is being affected by climate change. Evidence exists in Ghana today that tells us that our road infrastructure is being affected by climate change. The work by the Environmental Protection Agency, and of course, together with the National, Disaster Management Organization, says that 13 bridges collapsed, 1,016 kilometers of feeder roads were destroyed, 442 covered damage in the northern region in 2007 by climate-related events. In the city of Accra, where we find ourselves now, practically, a road was rolled over completely in a suburb called Kanechi in Accra due to flooding. A small town in TWEREFOU also saw significant impact of climate change or rains on roads. And if you go to the area around Kita municipality, the rising sea level is already eroding coastal roads. In fact, impacting the communities. Many of the communities are now being moved from where they live now just because of the impact of what? Climate change. I here show you some examples of some bridges that have been damaged by climate change because of the flooding. You see the bridge, coming down. And recent work that we did suggests that there are about 65 critical bridges that should be reinforced in Ghana. That's why if it rains a lot, those bridges may collapse and it will have impact on all economic activities. You see the sea level rise over here where the sea is coming closer to land in some parts of the country. The TWEREFOU incident is what you can see here. And when a whole bridge collapsed because of the heavy floods, many of the local people even thought that the river gods are annoying, and that is why the bridge has broken. The simple reason is that climate change is impacting on the road infrastructure that we do have. So what is the objective of this simulation modeling that we did? We want to quantify the economic cost of the impact of climate change on road infrastructure with a view to helping policymakers make informed decisions about the need to adapt to climate change or otherwise. So what we intend doing here is that what is the cost of this impact on climate change, the actual cost. So what is happening is that we're moving away from the potential and try to have an estimated cost, and that is what may guide policymakers in their quest to address the issue of or the impact of climate change on road infrastructure. The literature has a lot to say in terms of the impact of climate change on infrastructure, focusing more on roads. And here you can see that several studies are focused on the economic impact of climate change on roads. 10 days south something, classing this as a North, Dore, Natural Resource Department of Canada, AMED, Gilbert, they've all done something on the impact of climate change on roads. The problem associated with these works is that these studies use weather prediction to hypothesize potential impact of climate on road infrastructure. So here is on hypothesis, here is on potential. What they fail to do is to provide specific estimates of the potential impact. And this Sinotsky in 2010 made a good critic of these studies, right? And that is why the methodology for trying to come out with some figures, trying to come out with some estimates was more or less developed by Sinotsky and then Stratos, trying to put some quantitative figures on the impact of climate change on roads. Now, the methodology that we use is what we call the infrastructure planning support system software. This is a dynamic infrastructure simulation model developed by the Institute for Climate and Civil Systems in the US. And more or less, the software is based on the theory of the stressor response methodology. The stressor response methodology. Now, the detailed work for the methodology has been published by Sinotsky in 2010, all right, where the stressor response methodology has been detailed, explained, all the impacts, all the parameters, all the criteria has been well detailed in that work. Here, I just provide a little summary of that methodology, but members or participants who are more interested in this work can look at the work of Sinotsky and then get to know more about it. So what is the stressor response framework? This framework is made up of, two main steps. First, what you do is that it uses foresight to determine the potential impact of climate change on specific roads in specific locations. So here, the foresight here is talking about 54 different global circulation models that are being used to look at how these models will have impact on specific roads in specific locations. The global circulation models, as I said, talks about how temperature, precipitation, sea level rise will change in different areas based on different scenarios. So when you take a specific scenario in a specific area, you're able to know how temperature, precipitation will change and how that change may impact on the road infrastructure in that area. That is the first step. So the second step is that we use that information on the impact of a specific global circulation model on a specific road in a specific area, determine the cause of the impact based on a set of stressor response functions. And there are two components of the stressor response functions. Exogenous factors, these are stresses, the precipitation, temperature, and flooding, which affect focal elements of the road. And then the response comes in. What do you need to do to make sure that the road will still be usable? The second component is the impact on road, which depends on the type of road. So for different roads, the impact is going to be different. And then when you talk about different roads, here we have two classifications, paved and unpaved of roads. So if a road is paved, it means it's asphalted. If it's unpaved, it means it's not asphalted. The second one, function of the road. It's a primary road, meaning that it's more used, right? A tertiary road is less used. So we have two main components, paved, unpaved, and then the economic importance being tertiary, secondary, or primary. So these would determine the impact. And once we have the impact, then we know how the response will be. And from the response, we are able to determine the cost or the impact. In terms of the response to, we have two main categories. And this is where the scenarios come in. We have an adapt scenario and then a no adapt scenario. So in the adapt scenario, We're looking at the impact on new construction costs. What it means is that we try to calculate, or the software calculates, the additional cost required to adapt the design and construction of a new infrastructure asset or rehabilitate the assets to changes in climate expected to occur over the asset's lifespan. What happened is that, okay, this is the lifespan of the asset. Assuming we want to change it so that it will be able to withstand climate change over the asset, how much is going to be the cost? The second scenario, which we term as no adapt scenario, is the impact of maintenance costs. Here, the software tries to calculate the maintenance costs which are anticipated to be incurred due to climate change to achieve the desired lifespan. So these are the two scenarios that we try to develop in order to inform policy making. Now, data inputs, that software, as I said, depends on the classification of roads, right? Primary roads, secondary roads, because based on these classifications, you are able to know how strong the roads are. And also based on the road type, whether paved or unpaved, you are able also to know how the impact will be. We do this for all the administrative regions in Ghana and districts, and we have a lot of data that we needed to collect. All this data, we needed to collect the data from the Ghana Highway Authorities, the Department for Federal Roads, and the Department for Urban Roads, feed into the program or the model to be able to come out with these data. Now, let's look at the histogram of the various scenarios. Now, as I said, in this work, we use 54 different global circulation models. So these models have differences in terms of the impact on temperature, differences in terms of the impact of precipitation. So out of these 4, the impact on specific roads in specific areas would also differ. What we see is that in the no adapt scenario, the impact, as you can see here, right, I'm trying to look for my pointer. The impact, as you can see here, is quite high in the case of no adapt. So for about 25%, 28% of the 54 models, of the 54 global circulation models, the cost is going to be around this over the 50-year period. And also for the adapt scenario, for 28% of the 54 global circulation models, the cost is going to be around 670. For the others, the cost will rotate around that. So it tells you that for most of the models, the cost is going to be around the figures as you see there. So this is more or less a robustness check to tell you that for many of the models, right, for many of the global circulation models, the cost is going to be around 526 for the no adapt situation, and then 670 for the adapt situation, suggesting that there is more confidence in these models, and therefore we can use it. I summarize here the cost. And in order to find a metric to express this cost, we look at it from the kilometers of road lost. So what this means is that if the government decides not to adapt by maintaining the roads as it goes on, it is going to cost 474 million, which is equivalent to 3,158 kilometers of road lost. So here the roads were made based upon, the cost of construction in the US, and then later we use an index, right, to scale down to the various African countries, including Ghana. However, if the government decides to adapt by trying to adjust all the roads to make sure that they withstand climate change in the next 50 years, then the cost is going to be 679 million US dollars, equivalent to 4523 kilometers of road. So the reason is that why is it that adaptation or policies cost higher than the no adaptation policy? It's quite clear. So the policies of adaptation comes at a higher cost due to the requirement of changing methods of construction and rehabilitation of roads whose impact may not be felt initially until the impact will set in some time. What may happen is that if we adapt, within some time that the impact of climate change, which we know is a little 50 years, we will still be adapting it. So we are going to incur high cost now, but the impact will be felt in the future. So there is a cost that we are incurring here or currently that is not really necessary. Also, the level of upgrade required in the no adapt policy may be higher than the extent of the impact, leading to excess costs over the benefit. So we are upgrading so many roads now. What may happen is that we don't need that adaptation now, and therefore the cost is being high. Another thing is that when we look at Ghana, for example, many of the roads are unpaved. And adapting it means paving it. The criteria for adapting it means paving it. Of course, that will lead to a significant, paving of many of the unpaved roads, which may have other socioeconomic impacts. But then the cost is going to be high now, and then in future, we may not need that. So these are the reasons that allow the adapt policy to have a higher sort of cost than the no adapt policy. So if you want to look at the cost on a decadal scale, what we realize is that the adapt cost is going to give us high cost, in the initial years around 179 in 2020, but then the no adapt is going to be very less. But we see the cost reducing, reducing as we go on because we are now strengthening. We begin strengthening all our roads, paving them in anticipation that climate change will set in future. So the cost is high now, and then it tapers off as it goes on. In the case of not adapt, it means that as we go on, the climate change sets, we maintain them. So we see that from 2040, where the impact would set in, then the maintenance cost of all these roads goes up, and then we have the situation. Our model permits us to also look at the costs of adapt and do adapt on regional basis. And here you can see that in Greater Accra, for example, that is where we are going to have a lot of the costs. And then when you look at the northern region too, there is going to be significant increase in costs. And when we did, we went down to the data, we got to know that the adaptation may require more paving of roads in the northern region, and that is why the cost may be quite high over there. The model also permits us to look at, how the adaptation will be in terms of the road type, in terms of the unpaved road, and this is what we see over here. So, in a nutshell, what we conclude from this work is that it's going to cumulatively cost Ghana between 2020 and 2000 about 473 million maintaining and repairing damage caused existing road directly as a result of what climate change. However, if Ghana focuses on a reactive response to climate change, the cost increases to about 678 million. So economically, it's beneficial for Ghana to adopt the no adapt situation than the adapt scenario. This brings me to, so what happened is that the high cost will be incurred in the northern region if the cost decides to, if Ghana decides to opt for adapt policy, and the lowest it will be felt in Greater Accra region. And the simple reason is that many of the roads in the Greater Accra region are paved, when the reverse is the case in the northern part of the country. And the cost of adapting unpaved roads is higher than that of the unpaved roads in the adapt policy, while the reverse is the case in the no adapt policy. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Daniel TWEREFOU. That's quite a very exciting presentation, bringing more quantitative analysis to the impact of climate change on road infrastructure. Thank you so much. So as we said earlier, if you have any question, please put them in the chat, and I will ask them on your behalf. And we are going to have some discussions just after these presentations. So Prof, thank you. So your screen is still there. Please, can you take it off? Thank you very much. So without any further delay, I'll go to the chat. I think I have 2 questions from Kirk, and they are directly towards the first presentation by Dr. Arkebe. So Doc, if you are there, I crave your indulgence to listen to Kirk's question. So he asked 2 questions. The first one is that, I noted you mentioned Ethiopia for being the trailblazer in a lot of things. They clearly know what works. You also bemoaned the poor collaboration between countries. Can you comment on how we can promote knowledge and possibly resource sharing? The question now, just a minute. Can you comment on how we can promote knowledge and possibly resource sharing between countries, at least at the regional level, between those that have found a system that works like Ethiopia and those that are still looking for an answer to some of the challenges that they face? I don't know, Dr. Arkebe, if you are there, if you can maybe give some comments to this. Okay, let me move on to the second question as we wait for. So Kirk is still asking, as mentioned, COVID-19 is showing that leadership must be resilient, learning and adaptability in family and economy. Is there a way that this can be promoted through formal education in schools? So these are 2 questions to Dr. Arkebe. There's another question. So let me just read that one. I'm not sure who this is directed, but I'm sure the presenters will note it and move on. So he said that as we are advocating for green carbon economy in Africa, how prepared are we to deal with the inequalities and injustices that will arise from the distribution of benefits and burdens of climate change? He said that, do we have climate philosophers and ethicists to push for climate justice dialogue in Africa? And how will Africa deal with climate refugees? So these are some of the questions that are coming in. I don't know if any of the presenters can take any of the questions that come.
Right. So, Dan, so let me start with the third question. And I think since this is a dialogue session, anyone can bring in ideas, we share ideas together and learn from each other. When it comes to, I think I'll start from the climate justice sort of dialogue, and then we'll move from there. If you look at all international agreements, definitely there has been issues of climate justice being taken care of in all international agreements. Well, the problem is the death. Look at the Kyoto Protocol, for example. Really, you know, it was more for Annex 1 countries, that is, you know, the developed world, and it was not really binding on developing countries, even though they were supposed to make some contribution. The real emphasis was on the developed world to make sure that they achieve certain targets, though it was not such defined for any phase. So this is from where the climate justice comes in. So at the international level, something is being done to make sure that the poor countries are safeguarded when it comes to climate justice. Again, there are also in most of the agreement, there have been some sort of resource transfer to be able to support developing countries to cope with this climate, the impact of climate change, and how we are all adapting to it. The Paris Agreement also lays emphasis on that. So many, I mean, if you look at the NDCs, okay, if you look at the NDCs, it's nationally determined. Though countries are supposed to talk about what they want to do, there are support and they are being given more flexible conditions than the developed world, where some clear targets are being set and more must be done. So what I can say is that something is being done at the international level. The depth of what is being done is where the problem is. The argument goes this way that Africans have very little to do with climate change in terms of our contribution to climate change, and therefore we have no business, even being worried to go into anything related to mitigation. But we shouldn't forget that the impact is more on us, and therefore doesn't pay to sit aside and just think that the developed world should be the only one that should do. The other part is that there are some opportunities in there. There are a whole lot of opportunities in there which the fourth industrialization may bring out. And it is incumbent on us to see how we can also move with the times. So the issue of climate justice, yes, the problem, the inequality is at the international level, something is being done. The operationalization, the problem, but as we keep talking about it, definitely come at a time where more impact or more sort of support may be given to the developed world to make sure that there is justice on the issue of dealing with climate change mitigation.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you, and I think that's very insightful. And the other question on, can we comment on how we can promote knowledge and possibly resource sharing between countries, at least at the regional level, and between those that have found a system that seems to work, like the Ethiopia example that Doug gave. I don't know if anybody within the discussion can put something across. Anybody. How can we promote knowledge and possibly resource sharing between countries in this phase of COVID-19 and climate change, all that?
Well, let me make an attempt to intervene a little, though I'm not too sure about. I think today, because of the internet and because of ICT, it's much easier to share knowledge than in the past. So the opportunity is there, right? Share knowledge than in the past. We're talking about the Ethiopian example where we know that the idea for the country to go green. So when it comes to transportation, a lot of green is going on. When it comes to hydro, a big hydro is being constructed. When it comes to trees are being planted, etc. There are so many models, okay, that the country is using to make sure that the green agenda is propelled. These knowledge, to me, are not far-fetched when it comes to African Union discussions, ECOWAS discussions, and UNECA discussions. We've all managed to participate in many of these discussions where the agenda has been raised more forcefully. The question lies more in countries having the willingness to be able to really participate in many of these things. When you go to Ethiopia, you mentioned more about governance. Governance structures are more or less embedded, in the first president where the idea is a little community oriented, but more towards using what is locally available, all right? Using what is locally available to propel it. And what I said, development is about using what you have than trying to focus on whatever somebody has got to propel your development. So the onus lies on Africans or some of us to be able to really embrace what is there and then move with it. And I think that is where governance comes in. That is where leadership comes in. The leadership in Ethiopia, to the best of my knowledge, has be more transparent, less corrupt. It's more about communities focusing within, looking at what is within, and always trying to look from what is coming outside. And because of the confidence and the governance that is going on, it was quite easy for Ethiopia to attract so many investments like the hydro, like the railway, the transport. These are investments that many of our countries are finding it difficult to attract, right? If you look at, international funds, for example, in Ghana, how much of those funds that we have been able to attract, you can see that it's not as significant. Apart from the ones that are being given us through the global climate funds, etc., going to forcefully chase international funds has been difficult, partly because it's not easy, partly because the status here does not permit, right, real intervention by by the international. So it boils down to trying to reorganize our way of doing things, trying to make sure that it's quite easy for somebody to invest, and trying to make sure that the confidence, the investor confidence is there, then we'll be able to attract those funds and move on with a green agenda. That is my little contribution.
Thank you so much for the insightful contribution. I don't see any further questions. I don't know if anybody still don't have any further comments or any other comments. We'll proceed. But the questions that have been asked can still be discussed, as we move along. And we would like to, wrap up for the first section for a tea or coffee break. We are going to come back in the next 30 minutes at 11. I'm sure we all have the Zoom link to the next section, and we'll be looking forward to seeing everybody for the next section. The next section will equally be very insightful, and we'll be expecting that we all come here. There will be about 5 presentations, if I'm right. Yes, we are going to have 5 exciting presentations, and you can't afford to miss it. So without much ado, I would like to just end here and prepare ourselves, have some break, stretch your legs, have some coffee, and let's come back in 30 minutes. Thank you very much.